The pressure from Ridgewood Estates didn't stop with the letters and surprise inspections. If anything, it intensified. Each day seemed to bring a new challenge, a fresh attempt by Victoria Langley to wear Emma down. At first, the tactics were subtle, just enough to irritate but not enough to provoke outright conflict. But as weeks turned into months, the harassment grew bolder, more invasive, and far harder to ignore. Emma began noticing strange cars parked near her property line late at night. She'd catch glimpses of headlights sweeping across her fields, or hear engines idling in the distance. It was unnerving, like being watched without knowing who or what was behind it. One evening, she decided to investigate. Armed with a flashlight and her trusty dog Max trotting faithfully beside her, she walked toward the edge of her land. The closer she got, the louder the engine noise became. When she finally reached the source, she found two men in dark clothing, leaning against an SUV, casually snapping photos of her ranch with expensive cameras. "Can I help you?" Emma called out, her voice sharp enough to make them jump. One of the men stammered, No ma'am, just admiring the view." "The view belongs to me," Emma replied firmly. "And so does this land. If you're thinking about trespassing, don't bother. I'll call the sheriff." The men exchanged nervous glances before climbing back into their vehicle and speeding off. Emma stood there for a moment, heart racing, before heading back to the house. She couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just some random curiosity. It was part of a larger plan. These weren't ordinary visitors. They were pawns in Victoria's game. Back inside, Emma locked the doors and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the stack of papers in front of her. There were inspection reports, legal notices, and those anonymous letters, all neatly organized yet overwhelming. Every time she thought she'd addressed one issue, another popped up. It felt like playing whack-a-mole, except the stakes were much higher. This wasn't just about fines or citations, it was about survival. Her survival. The ranch's survival. Her phone buzzed on the table, pulling her attention away from her thoughts. The screen lit up with an unfamiliar number. Hesitant, she answered, anyway. "Hello?" "Ms. Thompson," came a clipped, authoritative voice on the other end. It was Victoria. "I've been meaning to discuss your recent non-compliance with our requests." Emma sighed, gripping the phone tighter. "Ms. Langley, my compliance isn't required because I'm not part of your HOA. My property is private land, and I intend to keep it that way." Victoria's tone shifted, becoming colder, almost threatening. "You seem to misunderstand the situation. Your refusal to cooperate is causing problems for the entire community. People are unhappy, Ms. Thompson, very unhappy. And when people are unhappy, things tend to escalate." Emma frowned, irritation bubbling beneath the surface. "Are you threatening me?" There was a pause, long enough to make Emma wonder if Victoria had hung up. Then softly, Victoria said, "Consider it a friendly warning. You're making this unnecessarily difficult for everyone involved. Perhaps it's time to reconsider your stance." Before Emma could respond, the line went dead. She stared at the phone, her pulse quickening. Friendly warning? The phrase sent a chill down her spine. What exactly did Victoria mean by escalate? Was this just empty talk, or was something worse coming? As the days passed, the warnings became less subtle. Workers showed up unannounced, claiming they needed access to her property to assess potential drainage issues. Neighbors from Ridgewood Estates complained loudly about the noise her livestock made, even though her animals rarely made a sound. Someone spray-painted graffiti on her barn door overnight, "Sell or else." The message was crude, menacing, and impossible to ignore. Emma tried to stay calm, reminding herself that fear wouldn't solve anything. Instead, she doubled down on her efforts to fight back. She hired additional security cameras to monitor her property and installed motion-activated lights around the perimeter. She also reached out to local journalists, hoping to expose what was happening. But every step forward felt like 2 steps back. Legal fees piled up, draining her savings. Sleepless nights became the norm as anxiety gnawed at her mind. Despite everything, Emma refused to give up. She spent hours researching property laws, determined to understand her rights. She joined online forums for small landowners dealing with similar battles, finding solace in shared experiences. Slowly, but surely, she pieced together a strategy to protect her home, not just legally, but emotionally as well. One particularly grueling afternoon, after yet another inspection team left her property citing a laundry list of fabricated violations, Emma collapsed onto the porch swing. Max curled up at her feet, his warm presence a small comfort. She closed her eyes, letting the gentle creak of the swing soothe her frayed nerves. "I can't do this forever," she murmured aloud, half to herself and half to Max. "But I have to, don't I?" Max wagged his tail in response as if to say, "Yes, you do." Emma smiled faintly, opening her eyes to gaze out at the horizon. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the fields. Despite the chaos swirling around her, the ranch still looked beautiful, peaceful even. It was a reminder of why she was fighting so hard. This land wasn't just dirt and trees. It was a sanctuary, a place where memories lived and dreams took root. But as peaceful as the moment felt, Emma knew better than to let her guard down. Victoria's words echoed in her mind. Things tend to escalate. Whatever came next, Emma realized, would require more than resilience. It would demand strength, courage, and perhaps a willingness to confront danger head-on. Because Victoria wasn't going to stop. Not until she got what she wanted, and Emma wasn't going to give in, not until her last breath. The tension that had been simmering beneath the surface finally boiled over on a crisp autumn morning. The air carried a chill, and the golden leaves of nearby trees swirled in the breeze as Emma went about her usual routine. She was feeding the horses, their soft nickers providing a comforting rhythm to the otherwise quiet day. Max, her loyal dog, lounged nearby, keeping watch as always. It was supposed to be an ordinary morning, but nothing about this day would turn out ordinary. Emma heard the sound before she saw anything. A car speeding down her gravel driveway, tires kicking up dust like a storm cloud. Her stomach tightened instantly. No one ever came barreling onto her property like that unless trouble was brewing. She turned just in time to see Victoria Langley step out of a sleek black sedan, her designer jeans and high heels looking wildly out of place against the rugged backdrop of the ranch. In her hand, she held something small but unmistakable. A handgun. For a split second, Emma froze, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. This wasn't another inspection team or a pair of photographers lurking near her fence. This was something far more dangerous. Victoria strode toward her with purpose, her face twisted into an expression Emma had never seen before, cold, ruthless, and utterly devoid of the polished charm she usually wore like armor. "You're done playing games," Victoria snarled, raising the gun and pointing it directly at Emma. "Sign the papers or this ends here." Emma's heart pounded so loudly she could hear it in her ears. Fear surged through her body, but strangely it didn't paralyze her. Instead, it ignited something deep within, a spark of defiance that refused to let her back down. She straightened, her posture, gripping the pitchfork she'd been using to toss hay to the horses. It wasn't much of a weapon, but it was all she had. "You don't want to do this," Emma said evenly, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. She took a cautious step backward, putting some distance between herself and Victoria while keeping her eyes locked on the gun. "Oh, I think I do," Victoria shot back, advancing slowly. "You've made this personal, Emma. You've wasted my time, cost me money, and embarrassed me in front of my neighbors. Selling your land is the only way to fix it. And if you won't do it willingly—" She paused, letting the threat hang heavy in the air. "Then I'll make sure you regret it." Emma's mind raced. She knew she couldn't outrun someone with a gun, especially not across open ground where there was nowhere to hide. But standing still and waiting for whatever came next wasn't an option either. She glanced around quickly, assessing her surroundings. The barn was too far away to reach safely, and the nearest tool shed was even farther. All she had was the pitchfork and her wits. "Victoria," Emma said, trying to keep her tone calm and measured. "This isn't going to solve anything. If you pull that trigger, you'll destroy everything you've worked for." "Is this really Worth it? Victoria hesitated for the briefest moment, her confidence wavering slightly, but then her jaw clenched and she shook her head. Don't try to talk your way out of this, I'm done negotiating. Without warning, she lunged forward, waving the gun wildly as if daring Emma to move. That fraction of a second was all Emma needed. Drawing on years of self-defense training she'd taken after moving back to the ranch alone, she acted instinctively. With a swift motion, she swung the pitchfork upward, deflecting Victoria's arm just as she squeezed the trigger. The gunshot rang out, deafening in the stillness of the morning, but the bullet missed its mark, embedding itself harmlessly in the dirt. Max barked furiously, his protective instincts kicking in as he leapt toward Victoria, teeth bared. Startled, Victoria stumbled backward, losing her grip on the gun. It clattered to the ground, skittering out of reach. Emma didn't hesitate. Dropping the pitchfork, she lunged forward, grabbing Victoria by the wrists and pinning her arms behind her back in one fluid motion. "Stay down," Emma commanded, her voice firm and commanding. For the first time since the confrontation began, Victoria looked genuinely afraid. Her earlier bravado crumbled, replaced by wide-eyed panic as she realized she was no longer in control. Emma held her firmly, her own breathing ragged but steady. "This is over, Victoria. You crossed a line you can't come back from." Victoria struggled weakly, muttering something under her breath, but Emma didn't loosen her grip. Instead, she called out to Max, who obediently trotted over to stand guard near the fallen gun. Then, keeping one eye on Victoria, Emma reached into her pocket with her free hand and pulled out her phone. Her fingers trembled slightly as she dialed 911, but her voice remained clear and composed when the operator answered. "I need help," she said. "There's been a shooting at Willow Creek Ranch." The wait for law enforcement felt like an eternity, though in reality it was only minutes. During that time, Emma kept Victoria pinned to the ground, her mind replaying the events over and over. How had it come to this? What kind of person brought a gun to someone else's property and threatened them over land? As horrifying as the situation was, Emma couldn't help but feel a flicker of satisfaction knowing she hadn't backed down. She'd faced her fear head-on and come out on top. When the sheriff's deputies arrived, sirens blaring and lights flashing, they found Emma sitting on the porch steps, hands wrapped tightly around a cup of tea she'd brewed while waiting. Victoria, handcuffed and visibly shaken, sat in the back of a patrol car, glaring daggers at anyone who dared look her way. The deputies asked Emma to recount what had happened, and she did so carefully, leaving out no detail. By the time she finished, the gravity of the situation settled over everyone present. As the authorities led Victoria away, one of the deputies approached Emma. "You handled yourself well out there," he said, tipping his hat. Not many people could stay calm in a situation like that. Emma nodded, exhaustion creeping into her bones. "I didn't have a choice," she replied softly. "This ranch means everything to me. I wasn't going to let her take it, not like this." The deputy patted her shoulder reassuringly. "You've got a strong spirit, Ms. Thompson. Don't lose that." After the chaos subsided and the property fell silent once more, Emma walked back to the spot where the confrontation had taken place. The pitchfork lay abandoned in the dirt, its wooden handle scratched but intact. Nearby, the bullet hole served as a grim reminder of how close she'd come to disaster. She knelt down, running her fingers over the disturbed earth, and whispered a quiet thank you. To herself, to Max, and to whatever higher power might have been watching over her that day. Though the immediate danger had passed, Emma knew this wasn't the end. Victoria's arrest would dominate headlines and the fallout would ripple through the community. But for now, all Emma wanted was a moment of peace. Standing under the vast autumn sky, she felt a renewed sense of determination. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she was ready to face them. After all, she'd already stared down the barrel of a gun and won. The news of what happened at Willow Creek Ranch spread like wildfire. By the time the sun rose the next morning, everyone in the surrounding area, and beyond, knew about Victoria Langley's arrest. Reporters flocked to the scene, setting up cameras and microphones near Emma's property line, eager to capture her side of the story. Neighbors whispered behind closed doors, some shocked by the lengths Victoria had gone to, while others admitted they weren't entirely surprised. After all, she'd always been known for her sharp tongue and iron grip on Ridgewood Estates. But pulling a gun? That was something no one could have predicted. Emma found herself thrust into the spotlight, though she wasn't sure how to feel about it. On one hand, she appreciated the support pouring in from people who admired her courage. Strangers sent letters and donations to help cover her mounting legal fees. Local businesses offered free supplies or services to assist with repairs around the ranch. Even Max seemed to bask in the attention, wagging his tail enthusiastically whenever someone stopped by to drop off food or kind words. But on the other hand, the constant scrutiny was exhausting. Every move she made felt like it was being watched, not just by reporters but also by members of the community who were divided over what had happened. Some saw her as a hero standing up against injustice, while others questioned why she hadn't simply sold the land when given the chance. Why fight so hard over a piece of property? They asked. To them, it was just dirt and grass, not worth risking your life for. They didn't understand that to Emma, it was so much more than that. As days turned into weeks, the case against Victoria gained momentum. Authorities uncovered a trail of evidence showing just how far she'd gone to pressure Emma into selling. Anonymous letters, fake inspection reports, even the graffiti on the barn door. All of it traced back to Victoria or her associates. Worse, still, investigators discovered that this wasn't the first time she'd resorted to extreme measures to get what she wanted. Several former residents of Ridgewood Estates came forward with their own stories of intimidation and bullying. One man claimed he'd been forced to sell his home after months of relentless harassment. A woman recounted how Victoria had threatened to evict her elderly mother unless she paid exorbitant fines for minor infractions. Each new revelation painted a clearer picture of a woman consumed by greed and power. Public opinion shifted dramatically. What had once been admiration for Victoria's leadership skills quickly turned to outrage. Protesters gathered outside Ridgewood Estates holding signs that read, "Justice for Emma," and "No more bullying." The HOA itself began to crumble under the weight of scandal. Members resigned en masse, refusing to be associated with Victoria's actions. Without her authoritarian presence holding everything together, the organization fell into disarray. Lawnmowers sat idle, fountains dried up, and pristine flower beds wilted as maintenance crews walked off the job. For the first time in years, Ridgewood Estates looked less like a polished paradise and more like an abandoned ghost town. Meanwhile, Emma focused on rebuilding, not just her life, but also her connection to the land. With the financial support she'd received from well-wishers, she hired workers to repair the damage done during the months of harassment. Fences were reinforced, the barn was repainted, and the water pump was upgraded to meet modern standards. Not because anyone told her to, but because she wanted to. She planted rows of wildflowers along the edges of her fields, creating a vibrant buffer between her property and the crumbling development next door. It was her way of reclaiming the beauty and serenity of the ranch, turning what had been a battleground into a sanctuary once again. Despite the progress, the emotional toll lingered. Sleepless nights became common as Emma replayed the confrontation with Victoria in her mind. Sometimes she woke up drenched in sweat, convinced she heard the echo of gunfire. Other times, she stared out at the horizon, wondering if she'd ever truly feel safe again. Yet through it all, she reminded herself of why she'd fought so hard. This land wasn't just hers. It belonged to the generations who had come before her and those who would follow. Giving up would have meant betraying not only herself but also her family's legacy. The trial finally arrived, drawing national attention. Courtrooms overflowed with spectators, journalists scribbled furiously in their notebooks, and television crews set up camp outside the courthouse. Inside, Emma took the stand, recounting every detail of her ordeal with calm precision. She described the anonymous threats, the surprise inspections, and the terrifying moment when Victoria pointed a gun at her. Her voice never wavered, even when Victoria's defense attorney tried to paint her as unreasonable or stubborn. When it was Victoria's turn to testify, she broke down in tears, claiming she'd acted out of desperation and regretted everything. But the jury wasn't swayed. The mountain of evidence against her spoke louder than any sob story. When the verdict was announced, guilty on charges of assault, brandishing a firearm, and multiple counts of harassment, the courtroom erupted in cheers. Justice had been served. For Emma, the victory was bittersweet. While she was relieved to see Victoria held accountable, she couldn't shake the sadness of knowing how low someone could sink in pursuit of greed. Still, she refused to let bitterness take root. Instead, she channeled her energy into something positive. Inspired by the outpouring of support she'd received, she decided to transform Willow Creek Ranch into a place where others could find solace and inspiration. She partnered with local conservation groups to create a wildlife sanctuary on part of the property, giving endangered species a safe haven. She converted an old barn into a community center, offering workshops on sustainable farming and rural living. Artists, writers, and musicians flocked to the ranch, drawn by its peaceful atmosphere and rich history. Slowly but surely, Willow Creek became more than just a family homestead. It became a symbol of resilience and hope. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Emma stood on the porch watching the sky turn shades of orange and pink. Max lay at her feet snoring softly. The ranch stretched out before her, alive with the sounds of nature and the hum of renewed activity. For the first time in months, she felt a deep sense of peace. The battle scars remained, the bullet hole in the ground, the faded graffiti on the barn. But they were reminders of how far she'd come, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually. Emma smiled to herself, feeling a quiet pride. She'd faced unimaginable challenges and emerged stronger on the other side. Whatever the future held, she knew she could handle it. After all, she'd already proven that she was capable of standing firm, even when the odds were stacked against her. And as long as she had the land beneath her feet and the memories of those who came before her, she would never be alone. The aftermath of Victoria's conviction brought a profound sense of closure to Emma, but it also marked the beginning of a new chapter for Willow Creek Ranch. The trial had exposed the darker side of unchecked power and greed, leaving an indelible mark on the community. For many residents of Ridgewood Estates, it was a wake-up call, a reminder that progress shouldn't come at the expense of humanity or history. Some former HOA members reached out to Emma, apologizing for their silence during Victoria's reign and offering to help restore what had been damaged. Though hesitant at first, Emma accepted their gestures, seeing them as opportunities to heal old wounds and build bridges. With the HOA dissolved and Ridgewood Estates left in disarray, there was talk of repurposing the development into something more sustainable. Emma played a key role in these discussions, advocating for projects that would benefit both nature and the people living nearby. Instead of cookie-cutter houses and manicured lawns, plans emerged for eco-friendly homes surrounded by protected green spaces. Walking trails were proposed to connect the area to Willow Creek Ranch, allowing visitors to experience its natural beauty firsthand. It was a compromise Emma could live with, one that respected her boundaries while fostering harmony between rural traditions and modern living. As the land around her began to change, so too did Emma's vision for the ranch. She poured her heart into transforming it into a place where others could find peace and purpose. The wildlife sanctuary she'd established became a haven for endangered species like red foxes, barn owls, and monarch butterflies. School groups visited regularly, learning about conservation efforts and the importance of preserving ecosystems. Emma loved watching children marvel at the sight of deer grazing in the meadows or listening intently as she explained how every plant and animal played a vital role in maintaining balance. The old barn-turned-community center buzzed with activity nearly every day. Local farmers shared tips on sustainable practices, artists displayed their work inspired by the landscape, and musicians performed under the stars on warm summer nights. Emma even started hosting storytelling sessions, inviting elders from the community to share tales of the past. These gatherings reminded everyone of the rich history embedded in the soil beneath their feet, a legacy worth protecting. Despite all the positive changes, Emma still faced moments of reflection. Late at night, when the world fell silent and the only sounds were the rustling leaves and distant hoots of owls, She thought about the journey she'd endured. There were times when fear had gripped her so tightly she wondered if she'd make it through. But those same fears had taught her resilience, forcing her to dig deep and discover strengths she never knew she possessed. She often found herself thinking about her father, imagining him standing beside her, nodding approvingly as he always did when she made him proud. One crisp spring morning, Emma decided to visit the spot where everything had changed, the place where Victoria had pointed a gun at her. The bullet hole was still visible, though faint now, almost blending into the earth. Max trotted alongside her as they walked across the field, his tail wagging lazily. When they reached the site, Emma knelt down and ran her fingers over the ground, feeling the texture of the soil between them. "This is where I stood my ground," she whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. "And this is where I won." Max barked softly as if agreeing. Emma smiled, brushing away a stray tear before standing up. She looked around at the rolling hills, the towering trees, and the endless expanse of sky above her. This was home, not just a piece of property, but a living, breathing testament to perseverance and love. No amount of intimidation or violence could ever take that away. Over time, Emma noticed subtle shifts within herself. She wasn't the same person who had nervously greeted Victoria on that first day months ago. Back then, she doubted her ability to fight back, fearing she might lose everything she held dear. Now she carried herself with quiet confidence, knowing she'd faced one of life's greatest storms and emerged stronger because of it. Her experiences had taught her that courage wasn't the absence of fear, it was acting despite it. And sometimes standing firm meant not just defending your own rights, but inspiring others to do the same. The ranch continued to thrive, becoming a beacon of hope for those seeking refuge from the chaos of the modern world. Families came to spend weekends camping under the stars. Couples exchanged vows in the golden light of sunset, surrounded by fields of wildflowers. Writers penned novels inspired by the serenity of the landscape, and photographers captured breathtaking images that graced magazine covers. Each visitor added another layer to the story of Willow Creek Ranch, weaving their own memories into its tapestry. Emma eventually wrote her own book, a memoir detailing her battle against Victoria and the lessons she learned along the way. Titled Standing Firm, A Story of Courage and Legacy, it became a bestseller, resonating with readers who admired her determination and authenticity. Proceeds from the book went toward funding scholarships for young environmentalists and supporting local initiatives aimed at preserving rural heritage. Emma traveled briefly to promote the book, speaking at events and schools, but she always returned to the ranch. No matter how far she ventured, this land remained her anchor. Years later, as Emma sat on the porch swing watching another sunset paint the sky, she reflected on how much had changed since that fateful autumn morning. The ranch was no longer just hers, it belonged to everyone who cherished it. Yet it still felt deeply personal, a part of her soul forever tied to its roots. She glanced down at Max, now gray around the muzzle but still as loyal as ever, and patted his head affectionately. "You've been with me through it all, haven't you?" she said softly. Max thumped his tail against the wooden planks in response, his eyes filled with trust and devotion. Emma leaned back, letting the gentle sway of the swing lull her into a state of calm. The challenges she'd faced hadn't disappeared entirely. Life was unpredictable after all, but she'd learned to embrace uncertainty rather than fear it. She'd proven that standing firm didn't mean refusing to adapt. It meant holding on to your values while finding ways to grow and evolve. As darkness settled over the ranch, fireflies began to dance in the fields, their tiny lights flickering like stars scattered across the earth. Emma closed her eyes, listening to the symphony of crickets and frogs, and felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the land that had shaped her, for the family whose memory lived on in every corner of the property, and for the countless strangers who had rallied behind her during her darkest days. Willow Creek Ranch wasn't just surviving, it was thriving, and so was Emma. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew she'd face them with the same courage and determination that had carried her this far. After all, she'd already proven that she could weather any storm.